Again, Renney, thanks for your kind words. Appreciate it. It's great to be here, and I do not like the shootout at all. I think it's ironic because when I was in New York, I had Henrik Lundqvist as my goaltender, and I might have been the only coach in the NHL that actually started with the other team shooting because I knew Henrik was going to stop the puck, and he did most times. And whereas normally you shoot, put the pressure on the other team, we put the pressure on the other team because our goaltending was that good. I did have some success in the shootout, but certainly not as much as I wanted internationally, that's for sure. Welcome to the delegates. It's a pleasure to be here. I appreciate the work that Aku, you and your staff have done to put this on. I think it's critical that when we get together like this, we talk hockey in whatever form it might look like. It doesn't have to be anything over technical or tactical for that matter, but it's got to sort of set the table for more dialogue. When you do break away, and visit with each other and have a beer and talk about what you heard that day or what's important to you in your world, and hopefully we can continue to serve as motivation to not just talk about the game but to deliver it. It's essential in this day and age, to say the least. How many of you here coach female hockey? How many of you here coach, say, under 16? And how many of you coach under 17 and above? Okay. The reason I ask that is that I think it's critical to realize too that there's no boundaries in my presentation, and as much as I might speak to a certain demographic or refer to a certain demographic, it's all inclusive. It doesn't matter if it's a little boy or a little girl. It doesn't matter if it's a professional player. It doesn't matter if it's a high performance player. It doesn't matter if it's a recreation teenager, quite honestly. The bottom line is that in this day and age, to me anyway, there's a certain way with which to communicate with kids and adults that play the game, for sure. And if we don't have an ability to do that, I think it's really tough to kind of capture what you want out of your players, and ultimately what they expect out of you, quite honestly. So you'll hear a little bit about my philosophy as I kind of present this. And I think because of my role as the chair of the coaching committee, and I think too, to be honest with you, taking advantage of having a National Hockey League career and also having the opportunity to coach quite a bit internationally, it would almost be expected of me and easier for me to come up and just talk about high performance and talk about the NHL and all the sexy names and everyone can relate to that. But I also believe that it's really important for me to identify with grassroots and development, to identify with girls that play, to identify with para-hockey, for example. But, in other words, don't put myself in a box where everyone expects me to talk about the cool stuff. I think it's important, with my opportunity at least, and the voice that I think I can carry, to talk about the broad range of where the game is. And most of all, for me anyway, how to deliver on that. Technology is certainly a very big part of our existence, never mind the game of hockey. As many of you know and I think have experience with, over the last 20, 25 years, video has certainly been very much a part of how we do our jobs in the game. It's now become more of a digital game, if you will, and we pay a lot of attention to that aspect of technology. Analytics, we analyze everything from how long it took the Zamboni to come out and go around the ice 12 times to how many strides a player took in his shift of 42 seconds, all those things. And you know what, there's some relevance to all of that, there's no question about it. But we can also analyze ourselves to a standstill. We can paralyze ourselves and our ability to coach and provide the type of experience that we should as coaches if we get too analytical. I'm not suggesting for a second we shouldn't. That's the science of the game. But to me, hockey is an inexact science. You have maybe an inch and a half of each blade that makes contact with the ice. It's played at a high speed. You change on the fly. Stoppages are seldom, and when they are, they're quick. So to me, I think that the analytics and the technology that's involved in the game, although critical, also can be a bit of an impediment if we're not careful. The beauty of the game, and if you talk to, in my case at least, North American football players, basketball players, baseball players, as has been the case for myself, they'll tell you they love to watch hockey because of the spontaneity of it, because there are no stoppages, because you've got to be on your game, for that 40 seconds, and every second of that 40 seconds. And that when the changes do occur, especially when without stoppages, it makes it that much more exciting. So the very sports that I think we all admire, and I would imagine European football as well, they love watching hockey, and I think we're in it for the same reasons. I remark on technology because I think when you talk about connectivity, technology has everything to do with that in our day and age. For those of you that have youngsters at home, and I have adult daughters now, but certainly they helped me navigate my way around the first few years of a laptop and a cell phone and the iPad, those types of things. They still do. Kids nowadays grow up with these things in their hands, when they're 5 and 6 and 7 years old, and that seems to be a really critical way to communicate. And it is, for sure, there's no doubt about that. What we have to be careful of, though, is that we don't allow technology to become the core piece of our communication, certainly when it comes to that interpersonal touch of communication. And with that, I think we look at an aspect of the game that we can't lose sight of. And that's the human element. I understand and appreciate, because I've done it myself, when we sit down and go through video clips with a player and identify those things that they've done well, and how to continue to do that, or those areas where they might want to improve upon, or whatever, that's great. There's no question about that either. But, when we end up coaching the game through our cell phones, or coaching the game through text messaging, whatever the case may be, we lose that interpersonal touch, and that's really, really important for me. I believe that in our case, at least, we have 4 questions to ask ourselves, and you can't ask these just by the electronic method. You've got to be able to sit down and talk to people, talk to each other, but you have to ask yourself in many cases, and when you talk about coaching, you ask yourself what it is I do. Well, I coach hockey, you coach hockey, and any numbers of forms, whether it's ball hockey, whether it's sledge hockey, whether it's adult hockey, whether it's recreational hockey, whatever the case may be, street hockey, we teach hockey. We also ask ourselves who we teach, who we work with. Well, we work with the demographic that starts from maybe 5 and 6 years of age, up to adult for sure, and into their 40s, and even adult rec hockey, which is 60 and 70 years of age. We have to identify with who it is we work with, who we coach. We also have to ask ourselves where we coach. Well, we could take these chairs out of here and we could play hockey in here. If that were to freeze out there, we'd be able to play hockey out there. Certainly we play hockey on an ice surface. We play hockey on a street. We play hockey on a field. We play hockey without pucks. We play hockey with balls. We play hockey everywhere. Everywhere you can possibly imagine. And we play it almost any time of the year now. If we rely only on technology to ask ourselves these questions, I don't know how we're going to answer the last question I'll ask you, and I'll do it at the end of my presentation. It's the 5th why. In North America, now these are statistics that are relevant to North America, but I think they'll resonate with you here. 4% of the playing population in North America play junior, college, minor, pro, professional, and that's 96% of the players that play the game play everything but that. So from the National Hockey League right down to Junior A hockey, it's 6% of the playing population in North America. Sorry, 4% of the population. 96% play the rest. So where does that leave us? What does that leave us when it comes to communicating with your athletes and making the hockey experience something special? 1 out of every 9 kids in Canada plays hockey. That's not good enough as far as I'm concerned. Now, what is even more frightening, we would love them to play hockey, but the bottom line is that they're not choosing to be active. And they're not choosing to be active for the same reasons I spoke of earlier, and that is because of technology in lots of cases, because of the digital age, because of the ability to drag and click and be anywhere you want, anytime you want, however you want, within milliseconds. And so what we have to be wary of as well is that if we're not careful, we'll have a sedentary lifestyle globally, with mental health issues globally, because there's not been the type of interaction that's required between a coach and a player. And again, it doesn't matter if the player is 26, 36, or 6. If we rely on the message only coming through technology, children don't have to leave their homes anymore. And I think that's a real scary thought. 5 million kids in North America left community sports in the past 4 years. 5 million left community sports. Now, sure, the population expands, it grows, there's no question about that. They don't always come back into hockey, but the bottom line is 5 million children left sport in North America. That was about 3 years ago. 70% of the kids leave organized sport by the time they reach 13. And why is that? If you think again about where we are in this day and age, with technology being what it is, I believe the human element is lost and becoming more and more scarce with respect to how we interact with our athletes. 5 reasons players leave hockey. Not the only reasons. There's expense, there's travel, there's time. Here's 5 reasons. It's no longer fun or enjoyable. And I know you, as coaches of the adult players of your professional teams, you might not equate fun with who it is you coach, but certainly it has to be enjoyable. And for children, it has to be fun, and it's not. It's becoming less and less so, possibly because of technology, possibly because of our inability to be spontaneous and impulsive and have a relationship with our athletes. They've lost ownership of the experience. In other words, because of our desire to ready ourselves to coach, to make sure our assistant coaches are ready, make sure our practice is ready, make sure our game notes are ready, make sure of this, make sure of that, all of a sudden the coach owns the hockey experience instead of who should own it the most, and that's the athlete, regardless of the age. They no longer own the experience. Another reason why players choose to leave. They're afraid to make mistakes. I can tell you, I coached a number of great hockey players in my day. Paul Correa, Jaromir Jagr, to name a couple. What made them so hard to play against was their creativity. And what they required was the opportunity and the ability for a coach to have the courage to allow them to make mistakes. There might not be anything harder in the game to defend than someone else's imagination. And yet we stifle that because we put the game in this little box. We might even text it to them. But the bottom line is we eliminate the opportunity for fun and creativity. And that's another reason why players choose to leave the game. They feel disrespected. Certainly that can be the case. I can't imagine trying to communicate with a player sort of from that emotional level, that connection you make as a coach with your players from an emotional level, again, through technology. And I'm not saying technology is bad. It's great if we use it properly. But you need to have that interpersonal connection. And if what I'm going to do is use electronics to send messages, or I'm going to do it without any type of an ability to connect with my athlete, or I do it in spite of what the environment might suggest, that's a recipe for disrespect. And players require that. We all do. We're human beings. We all require that respect level that's so necessary in having success in the game, whatever that might look like. If it's just fun, fine. If it is to win at a certain point in time, that has to be a common denominator for sure. And they don't get playing time. We can all relate to this. And again, it doesn't really matter. I mean, if I'm a parent of a 6-year-old and all of a sudden we're playing full ice hockey at 5 years of age, 200 by 100, and I watch my son or daughter touch the puck 3 times, and maybe get on the ice 6 times in a 45-minute time period, I'm afraid I think I've wasted my time. So another reason children or players leave the game is that they don't get an opportunity to play enough. And that too is critical. What the players want from a coach, from any one of us in this room here, what do they want from you? No matter where it is you coach. They want your knowledge of the sport. They want a positive role model who is current. So we're talking about the digital age, we're talking about technology, we're talking about ways and means with which to communicate with the click of a mouse. That is current. There's no doubt about that. But so too is knowing what's going on in their world socially. So too is knowing what's going on in school, what the academic curriculum might look like. So too is recognizing that you too one day had a boyfriend or a girlfriend, and there's that whole social dynamic you have to deal with. All of that's really critical. And if you want to be a good coach, regardless of the age group that you're talking or working with or gender, you've got to make sure that you're current and that you are, in fact, the role model that they can look up to and emulate. And I know every one of you in this room has someone, if not more than one, person that they can identify with. Clear, honest, consistent communication. That's essential for coaching. And again, it doesn't matter what age it is. In some cases, you might be talking to the parents as opposed to the child. It doesn't mean you don't, though, when it's the child's turn. And it does mean everything when it comes to being consistent in your approach, consistent with your message, and honest about it. And when you put all of these together, there's a recipe for success there in most cases. Someone who listens. The IIHF, prior to Christmas time, I think through Finland, decided to work with a program where the players had an opportunity to decide in a week of hockey what practices were going to look like, what they wanted to do. Now you can appreciate where at a certain level that's successful and where in others it's not. I can remember back a number of years ago, actually with the old national team in Canada, doing that very same thing, where I told our players in a week of training, we have 4 ice sessions this week, we have 6 ice-off sessions. You guys draw up the curriculum, do it in lines, do it as defense pairs, do it as goaltenders. We are going off of your practice plan for what we're going to do off ice, but you are going to deliver the drill or whatever the message was. So players on the ice had to stand in front of the whiteboard back in the day and describe the drill. And it was amazing the appreciation that they got for coaching, but it was also amazing how we had, as a coaching staff, an appreciation for how much they really and truly understood about the game and what was sinking in. And now we had ownership and we shared it. That's an example of someone who listens to their athletes and recognizes too that you have to demonstrate having had the ability to listen. It's one thing to listen, it's another thing to act on what you hear. Respect and encouragement. If you look at number 4 up top, number 5 for sure. And it doesn't matter who it is. I can tell you right now with Jaromir Jagr in New York, we would talk maybe 2 or 3 times a week. He wasn't a real talkative guy, but we had a very good relationship. And I know for sure that he would tell you I respected him. I will also tell you that for 5 minutes of that 45 minutes, we talked about hockey. And for 40 minutes, we talked about everything else you could possibly imagine. And it was one of the unique experiences I've had with a player in hockey. And I completely enjoyed it and certainly reflect on it in a favorable light since. So, as a coach, we're responsible for a couple of things. You're responsible for the environment, and you're responsible for the experience. Again, it doesn't matter what age group you're talking about. This could say organization, club team, whatever the case may be. I've chosen to use parent because that is very much a stakeholder. For those of you that are coaching professionally, this could say organization for sure. But the parent is also responsible for the environment and the experience. They contribute to that in a big way. The administrator, again, whether it's a club team, a general manager, whatever the case may be, they too contribute to that whole experience and what this looks like on behalf of the participant. And then there's us, the coach. When you put these 3 together, they're responsible for the environment, the safety of the environment, making sure that everything is where it needs to be. That as a coaching staff, everyone understands their roles, their duties, what is to be expected of them, and ultimately for the experience. And if you think about it, if we're in corporate hockey, for example, we are in the experience industry. And it doesn't matter, again, if you're 5 or 6 or 65 or 66. For those 3 groups there, and if we talk about the professional game as well, we talk about having control over the environment and ultimately the experience because of that. We are in the experience industry. And if we want to make sure that we challenge choices like, other sports, not to suggest they're bad, they're great, but we have to make sure that at least hockey is competitive because the experience is second to none. And we have to make sure that we do that and we pursue that objective on a daily basis. And right there is the key. And it's all about that participant right there. So the parent or the organization, the administrator or the general manager, the coach, are all 3 responsible for the environment and the experience that the player participates in. We have to make sure that that is always the focal point. Always. A lot of pressure on that one in the bottom sphere. We spend as much time with kids, with players, as parents or spouses do. And when you think back to what you are as a role model, when you think back to your ability to communicate, when you think back to your own value system maybe and your own principles of engagement, you can appreciate why this is becoming more and more and more important, the role of the coach. And don't underestimate that. Just because you coach pro and you have adult players doesn't mean that this is absolutely essential. It is. I've had the opportunity to coach in the National Hockey League, and I truly believe that your players play for a person who cares about them, cares about the experience and how they perform in it. The power of the coach. I don't know how old most of you are, but if you think back to the O.J. Simpson trial in the United States a number of years ago, there was what was called the buckskin lawyer. I think his name was Jerry Spence. Gray-haired fellow, wore a buckskin jacket. He had a great saying. He said, "Power is like gasoline. It can transport us around the world, or it can blow us up." Coaches are powerful people for all kinds of reasons. And if we abuse that power, we can cause serious damage. I'm not sure if you recognize this person. This is Sheldon Kennedy, former NHL player for a few years in the National Hockey League. Played major junior hockey in Canada for the Swift Current Broncos. From the age of 16 to 19, was sexually abused by his major junior coach. And spent about a decade completely lost. Drugs, alcohol, poor decisions, doing an awful lot to damage himself and the collateral damage of the people around him, including his family and friends. He's corrected himself. He now is a leader of what we call in Canada the Respect in Sport program. He travels the world. He's sat in front of the U.S. Senate. He's done all kinds of things he could possibly do to make sure that people understand the impact that coaching has on people and how you can, in fact, come out the other end of this if you have the courage to identify with it in the first place. Probably not what you were expecting today. Hockey's role in society. This is a guy from New Brunswick. 6 or 7 years ago, decided to go on a shooting rampage and killed 3 Royal Canadian Mounted Police officers. When I saw this and it came out, I thought to myself, boy, I wonder if he played hockey. And I'm thinking, if he would have, maybe this doesn't happen. Maybe he gets that kind of guidance that he required in his life to have some purpose, to acquire a certain skill set, to be able to make those types of decisions in life that allow you to kind of participate and contribute like a noble person should. And then I thought, holy shit, what happens if he did play hockey? We let him down. We let him down. And that's dangerous. And coaches have that kind of impact. Second generation Canadian. Obviously, troubled fellow. He killed an army officer at the cenotaph in Ottawa. Shot him in the back. New to Canada, from his parents. I said to myself, boy, I wonder if he played hockey. Because if he did, maybe this doesn't happen. Maybe we recognize the opportunity to impart our values through the greatest team game we can play. On teamwork, on accountability, on how to lift yourself up from failure and dust yourself off and keep going again. And then I thought, what if he did play hockey? We failed this fellow badly. So my point is this, that as coaches, we have a real deep obligation to make sure things like this don't happen. And we have a deep obligation to make sure that, I'll give you a second to read this, that we pay attention to the development of character. Again, by how we perform ourselves and how we interact with our athletes. Not through technology, not through the laptop, but in person. The human touch, the human element. And I believe that we do have a moral and ethical responsibility to deliver on all of that. Most of the coaches in Europe are well educated. I would love to be able to tell you that in Canada that's the same thing. They're volunteers. Some of them come from work where they've driven a truck or a bus. Some of them have been the janitor at the high school or whatever, and they volunteer their time. I'm not sure that they might have the level of education that coaches do in Europe, but I know one thing for sure, that if they do not have a personal set of morals and standards and ethics, we're in a tough position in coaching our athletes. Happiness is a competitive advantage. So for those of you that are coaching at a competitive level? What's wrong with having happy players? What's wrong with making sure the experience that you own is enjoyable and transfer it to them for the greater enjoyment of playing hockey? This is a Muhammad Ali quote. What you leave behind is not what you read on a stone monument, but what you weave in the fabric of others. I'll close with this. This is a little bit embarrassing, but I just hope you understand that I'm trying to use where I've been as a coach. And by the way, I've been fired twice and I wasn't re-signed a third time, so I'm not as shit hot as I thought I was. Matter of fact, I was pretty bad a couple of times. But that being said, the one thing I can promise you is that I coach to my principles and my ethics and my values every day. Not perfectly, doesn't exist, but to the best of my ability. He coaches when you need to coach, but he's got a great knack for knowing when to back off and let the players be players. There are a lot of guys that want to claim they reinvented the wheel. He's the opposite. He actually doesn't take credit when he deserves it. Brendan Shanahan. The whole thing is you have to respect the players. If you want to get respect, you have to give respect, and that's what he does. He respects the players who are playing for him, and they respect him. That's the bottom line. That's the starting point. Jaromir Jagr. His pushing was all from behind the scenes, often in small gestures like quickly putting a young player back out on the ice after he had made a mistake. Perry Pearns, a former National Hockey League coach himself, assistant coach. He's had 3 head coaches nominated for Coach of the Year in the National Hockey League. Some coaches would go nuts. I was on teams when you were losing and you think, oh my God, what are we going to do today? It's going to be 50 meetings and the coach is going to go crazy and the guys don't want to even come to the rink. It never happened to me here. Marty Straka. I had all 3 of those guys actually in New York. And the last one, there are so many good things popping up when I think about what he meant to me and his team. I learned a lot from him, not just how he coached, but also how he was around the rink towards his players. It was a very positive life experience. I recognize that championships are critical. They're very much in your best interest if you want to continue to coach and elevate yourself and maintain a certain trajectory and challenge yourself. It's wonderful stuff. And you should always want to be the best at something. But it should never be at the expense of values and principles and those things that help drive our society. The couple of players that I showed you are people that should never happen. And when you look around the world and what's happening nowadays, we are in a position to make a difference. But as much as championships are important, this is what's important. And this is what's most important to me. That's my Stanley Cup. That's my gold medal. That's my world championship. If you work like this, those things become almost a byproduct of your approach. And finally, the final W is why. Why do you coach? And do you coach for the rings? Do you coach for the championship? Do you coach for the notoriety? Do you coach because winning is a drug and you're revered around your community and in your country? Or do you coach because it's an experience that you have to provide the player? Because you're responsible for the environment and you want to make a difference in the population, not just in your community, not just in your country, but worldwide. And I think we should all take real serious solace in the fact that we can make a difference. And I told Pat Quinn once, we were struggling with one of our teams, and he said, Tom, what do I do with these guys? I said, Pat, you coach this team one player at a time. Thank you very much. Have a great seminar, and we'll look forward to bumping into you again.
Yes, you want to do it with this?
I just said to Aku, if I could make a comment, I think one of the things that you should always remember as coaches, or leaders in your community, I'm not sure this even works as well as I want it to.
Yeah, it works.
Just remember when someone's in a position to take your questions and be really honest about the answers, take advantage of that. Because not everybody wants to answer your questions. Not everybody has the time to. And you should always take that opportunity when someone says, are there any questions? Because it only takes 1 or 2 to get it going. But really, if I leave you with nothing else from here, ask questions of the guys coming up. Because that's a great opportunity, especially because they're good people. They care, they wouldn't be here, and they'll be honest with you. So if there's questions, great. If not, Aku, no problem.
But we gotta test this microphone and tossing it. Yes, I was gonna say that whoever does it gets a free beer, but you were a bit quick. You'll get it anyway. So you're ready? Yeah. We'll try.
Nice.
Hi. Does it work? Yeah. Okay, perfect. My name is Peter Bovinski. I'm from Slovakia and working as a skills coach. I'm working with the little kids. They start when they're 4 years old. I also work with the NHL players, KHL players. And the question is, that's the biggest fight for me. I'm also teaching and coaching my son.
Yep.
And I would like to, and that's really, really tough.
Yeah.
For him,
Sure.
also for me. I would like to have some knowledge how to deal with that.
I would teach mom to skate right away. And I'd get her on the case right now. You know, I think the big thing is that your son is going to watch how you treat others, you know, and all he wants is the same treatment. And, you know, you'll obviously be challenging of your other young players. You'll also make sure that you challenge him. But it's funny how, as parents, our tendency is to push our own children a little harder and demand a little bit more out of them than might be reasonable. The big thing is to be consistent and not to be afraid to demonstrate your love for your son in front of other children. You know, and make sure that you can also share that emotion with other kids. It's okay to hug them. It's okay to tap them on the top of the helmet. It's okay to make sure that the environment is fun. It's okay for your son to want to be a part of that because you're treating those others like you treat him and vice versa. The bottom line is it's not a race. Whatever his aspirations are as a hockey player will come because of how he's been treated, not because of what he's acquired along the way, but how he's been treated. If he's been treated well and fairly, the rest will come. But we have a tendency as parents of children in sport to think that they've got to be more than what they really are. They're no different than any other child. And in my mind, at least, treat them the same. Love him in front of his teammates. Love those other children in front of him. And recognize that it's about the environment. Because that environment will teach him as much as you will.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? Oops. Anybody else?
That works.
Time for one more. This is going to be a bit too easy, but have a bit of this.
Hi, Tom Tanner, still from That was cool. Okay. Tom Tanner, still from Boston, USA.
Hi, Dan.
I've been following your career for a long time. And I've been impressed with it. Question I have is on your philosophy, which you just shared with us. Did you start out with that philosophy, or was that a result of your experiences?
A combination of both. Like I hope most of us, I had great parents. I had really good summer jobs when I came home from university in the summertime. I had great summer jobs and one boss in particular that allowed me to have the freedom to do my job. It was a laborer's job, but I had an opportunity to hire a crew of players, friends, that worked with me in the summertime, but he taught me responsibility. And with that, I was able to, because it's part of my DNA, I will tell you, I believe it's always been a part of who I am. I believe as I matured, became confident, you know, as time goes on, I was able to impart that wisdom and those ethics and those principles more freely and feel very, very comfortable doing it. I've always been a bit of a philanthropist anyway, and a bit of a development coach even in the NHL for the person. And you know what, it's a great saying that Glenn Hannon said to me one time after I got fired in Vancouver. He said, Tom, a clear conscience is a soft pillow. And I believe that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.